Welcome in once again to another Alumni Spotlight here on the Queens Sports Network. As always, I'm Mike Glennon, glad to be alongside you and glad to be alongside Nick Arkelian, who is joining us, a 14-time national champion swimmer, class of 2018. Nick, thank you so much for carving out some time to talk to us here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Nick, I just mentioned it. You have a 14-time national champion, 6 individual championships, 3 times in the 400 individual medley, a 500, 1,000, and 1650 free, and then you were 8 more as a part of a relay team. Can I guess we'll start with the success here that you had. Can you just talk a little bit about the success here at Queens and kind of what led you to all those achievements, whether it was teammates, coaches, whatever it might have been?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start pretty early on in the process. It was definitely, Jeff Dugdale got me in the door to Queens. Really thankful for that. I really felt like, because at the time, my older sister was here as well. So she was 2 years ahead of me. We had very similar training styles. So I knew that would work out. Plus, at the time, coming into my freshman year, I don't believe we had won our conference yet. So I knew there was something special brewing at Queens, and it was cool to get on the ground floor of that.
Well, again, you were here for kind of the start of the run that has now become 6 national championships in a row for this program, as of course they just won their most recent one a couple of weeks ago. But looking back on your time here at Queens, I know you're a Michigan native, and obviously your sister came here as well. But what drew you to Queens here in the first place? I know obviously your sister was here, but what was it that really kind of sold you and drew you here to Queens?
Yeah, so that's a good question, a question I get pretty often. And my older sister Caroline, she knows this, but actually her being at Queens was a reason initially why I didn't want to go to Queens. Love my sister, she's awesome, but I was in high school. I was like, I want to blaze my own path, things like that. And so I actually took all 5 of my official recruiting trips by the NCAA. I went to Michigan, Texas A&M, Auburn, and Queens. And at the end of the day, I realized, and it was a shockingly mature decision for me at the time, I'll call it, but I wanted a place where I could swim and do schoolwork at the same time. So, I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just an athlete, which I got the feeling was happening at a lot of the larger universities.
Sure.
Getting on the ground floor of something special. I mentioned that earlier. But also build out my resume through extracurriculars, because I knew swimming wasn't going to be wasn't exactly the life plan to be a professional swimmer at the time. So with that, entering into Queens, I got the opportunity to not only be a team captain my sophomore year, but served the university as a Royal Ambassador. I got the Ford internship my junior year, and that was through Dr. Cox at the business school. And then I also got to be a part of a program called Transition to University, TTU, with Dr. Melinda Harper. And that was a ton of fun as well. Just all around, really built out my experience. Something very special.
Well, and you kind of alluded to it there. I think sometimes, and nothing to take away from bigger programs, because bigger programs are great. But that being said, sometimes the education process sort of gets lost in translation. And, it's one of those things that even if you did go on to bigger and better things when it comes to swimming, you always need that education base to really fall back on later in life. And I feel as though, from the athletes that I've talked to, that is such a big point of emphasis, especially with Coach Dugdale, of making sure that you understand that you are indeed students first. You're fantastic athletes, but the education process is big. So, can you talk a little bit about the education, and was it the smaller class sizes that really helped out, or was it just kind of all encompassing with the faculty, staff, everything else?
Yeah, so Jeff's got a great philosophy that I sort of remember to this day and is applicable throughout every point in your life. And that's you can't be giving 100% unless you're giving 100% in every area of your life by definition. So, if you're not giving 100% in the classroom, or if you're not giving 100% in the pool, like, you're just not giving 100%. That's kind of how it adds up. So, I mean, that was a big part of the philosophy. And then what was the rest of the question? Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Just talking about, looking at how the education helped shape you and kind of help mold you with that smaller class size, or the teachers, whatever it was that really helped you with the way you learned here at Queens.
Yeah, it was definitely the personal touch from the professors that I had. The smaller class size really helped. And as I got into the workforce, and specifically with the internship at Ford,
Mhm.
I noticed a lot of people from larger universities. I was there with kids from Michigan State and Indianapolis. And it was part of like, I felt like we were more comfortable from a small university. I was also there with Kira Jordan, another Queens student from my year. But coming from a smaller university, it just felt like I was more comfortable with my managers and with my higher ups. Just because in college, that's the closest thing you have to a manager is your professor. And if you can just walk up to the professor, raise your hand in a class of 20 students, I mean that's unparalleled when you're comparing it to a lecture hall of over 200.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you look at the average class size being under 15 students in the class, whereas you mentioned it, you go to a lecture hall when 9 times out of 10, sometimes in those universities, you don't end up speaking to the professor. You talk to teaching assistants and stuff like that. So having that personal touch. Now, were you a business major here at Queens, or what did you major in here at Queens?
Finance.
Finance. Okay. And so what is it that you've done now that you've left Queens and moved on? What is it you do for a career, and how have you used your education here to really kind of get yourself jump started in that?
Yeah, so I am now working for Unum. We're an employer benefits carrier, and I'm a small business consultant. So I handle businesses in the North Carolina area, particularly like Raleigh East, so Raleigh to the
Okay.
coast, pretty much. And that's employers under 100 employees, and we provide them benefits. It's actually gotten a lot more complicated recently, which is fun, right? That's part of the job. Obviously because of COVID, but also you're seeing an immense rise of technology in terms of different benefit administration systems and
Hmm.
more competitive benefits being offered, as well as the rise of focus on mental health, which we're accompanying pretty nicely. So
Sure.
it's exciting. It's a great career, and a career that I found through a connection at Queens. The head coach of the rugby team, Frank, is actually played college rugby with my current boss's boss,
Awesome.
and that's sort of how that connection came about.
Yeah, I mean, Coach McKinney's great. And like you said, I feel as though when you go to a smaller university, the ability to make those kind of connections and establish those kind of long-reaching connections can really help you later in life.
Yeah, you just form a closer relationship. And I sort of used this when I first went here, but it's worth talking, getting to know everybody, because you're just going to see them around campus more than you would at a university of tens of thousands of people.
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily like you're going to see somebody new every single day. You might, but you're going to see a lot of people you recognize on a daily basis as well. And, can you talk a little bit about kind of that brother and sisterhood of the swim program itself? Obviously, every athletic program likes to think of themselves as kind of a family and stuff like that. And I was talking to Danielle Malili a while ago about, kind of that, what she's feeling here as just a sophomore. And she mentioned just that feeling of family that she got with the swimming program. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Wow. I guess, first of all, I'm really happy to hear that. Coming from leadership on the team, especially when I started as a sophomore, I had a bunch of great mentors, obviously including Jeff, but captains as well. Ben Taylor's one that comes to mind, definitely. But yeah, that family relationship, something that we, fought vigorously to cultivate. And it started the first time new students walked on campus on the swim team. The first thing you got was a meeting with the captains that says, you're here, your family, we love you. There's no initiation process. There's no proving yourself. You've already done all that through the recruiting process. And then it's just hanging out. I mean, we're one of the few teams, especially in swimming, when you get up to Division I, we're one of the few teams that actually we practice together. Our nationals is together. So a ton of together time and a real rewarding experience, not only between the teams, but also between the upperclassmen and the underclassmen, which is just awesome. And I'm really glad that culture has carried on after you left. Cause that's sort of how I evaluate myself as a captain, right? If people are only fulfilling the vision that you had, and that, the legacy that those above you left while you're there, then what are you really imprinting on the culture if it just dissipates when you're gone? So I'm thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's well said right there. And, kind of, and that's one thing that you alluded to it a little bit in terms of there is no difference between upperclassmen and the underclassmen. It's just you're all one big family, and that's one thing that's really stood out to me, not just with swimming, but looking at the other programs. Is you walk into a gym and everybody is taking on that leadership role of you don't know who's a senior, who's a freshman, because everybody's talking, everybody feels comfortable with one another. And that's just a really cool thing to see. And obviously that leads to a lot of success, whether it's in the pool, on the field, or on the court.
Yeah, more part of the culture that Jeff helped. He made it very clear you don't need to be an upperclassman to be a leader. You don't need to be a captain to be a leader. Just lead by example. Everyone's a leader. Get in the water first, show up on time, do your prehab, do your rehab, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm really happy to hear that.
Well, let me ask you this, and I always like to hear this from different folks that have gone on, obviously now to professional careers and stuff like that. What are some things that you learned from the sport of swimming and that lifestyle that have helped you when it comes to being a working professional now?
Oh goodness, the discipline and the time management, definitely. All right. Yeah, that's absolutely it. So I'd say that's the thing that's left the biggest impact on me is even through high school, really rigorous schedule, obviously just morning practice and then, 6 straight hours of classes and then afternoon practice. College was a little bit easier than that, just in terms of the resources available to me and as far as our training staff, different tutors, the library being right there on campus, pretty central, was a good thing. But yeah, definitely the discipline and time management. I'd say that's the biggest thing. The most frustrating thing though is, in the working world, not every input equals an output. Swimming was like, you train hard, you're going to see your time drop if you're training the right way, which our coaches made sure of that. Out here in the real world, there's a ton of other factors that'll influence things, and it's not that one in, one out. So I'd say that's the most frustrating thing to me. My boss explained it to me pretty early on in my career. I think my first year, because I've been with Unum pretty much since I graduated. I started like 3 days after graduation. My boss explained to me, Jeff Patillo, he was like, the reason why you're experiencing so much frustration is in swimming, you fought and you trained really hard, but that was, to win national championships. Here, you're brand new to the scene. You're fighting really hard just to be, above average. He's like, that's something that you haven't had to do maybe ever. And I was like, that's a good point. So yeah, it's an adjustment, but those skills definitely translate.
Well, and you said it. I mean, unfortunately, it'd be great if everything worked out, and no matter how much you put into it. But of course, that's something you have to do. And I imagine your time, not just here at Queens, but really growing up in the sport and then really solidifying that here at Queens is understanding the fact that you just have to stay mentally tough and you have to persevere.
Yep, that's absolutely it. Change is another thing. We experienced a lot of change during our time at Queens, whether that be, a new assistant coach coming in or going out, or just changes to my stroke that they wanted to make, things like that. A lot of change. So I guess change, time management, change management, definitely. So
well,
it was a good experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me ask you this, speaking of experience, I guess if you can you pinpoint something that was really kind of your favorite part of being on campus here at Queens and what really like stands out to you when you look back on your time here that you're like, man, that was just one of my favorite parts of being a Royal?
Oh, definitely. It would have to be my teammates. Unquestionable. It's my teammates. I mean, just watching your teammates succeeding yourself, pulling together and winning a national championship too. Sure. Our first national championship. This is sort of a lesser known story. I was interviewed about this once before in my freshman year at the end, but our freshman year at NCAA's, we were going in to unseat a 10-year Dynasty Drury, which I think they're definitely in the top 3. They're always in the top 3 finishers. So we were going to unseat a 10-year Dynasty, and I remember sitting there in the pre-meet meeting that we had, and it was, hey, we can select where we want to sit. We can, we get second pick basically. So Drury's already got their seat, picked out right next to the starting blocks. We can either sit next to them or we're going to sit across the pool. And we're like, let's sit right next to them. Like, we want to be there. We're going to be loud. We're going to be having some incredible swims. And then I believe the second night of the competition, I think me and maybe 5 or 6 of my teammates on the men's team got food poisoning. Matt Josa and I got it really badly. And just so like fighting through that was huge, and as far as building camaraderie. And that really taught me the other lesson at Queens is they're not preparing you, academically, my coaches, they're not preparing you to succeed in perfect conditions. They're preparing you to succeed in spite of what may go wrong. So it's sort of that extra level, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, that's first off, that's an incredible story that you guys, that many of you got food poisoning and you still went out and, like you said, unseated a 10-time national champ, and then started the string that is now continuing on and making it your own dynasty. And you were there at the ground floor of that. So that's a pretty special story. And like you said, being able to work through that and persevere through that, because it's not always going to go the way you want it to go. And you just got to adapt and change. So. Well,
yeah, the full story is a little longer and a lot grosser. So
well, I do appreciate that, but at the same time, it's still a cool idea in terms of the way that all shook out. Last thing I have to ask is, if someone was considering becoming a Royal and really looking at, like you said, had been on several different visits and stuff like that, what would you say to them on how you believe it would change their lives for the better?
Wow. I wish I remembered my spiel for the end of my tours to prospective students.
Sure. I get you.
But just like using myself as an example, and I know like the phrase "you're more than just a number" is kind of overused, of course. A lot of places you're going to be more than just a number. But I think the difference boils down to an all-encompassing one. One, of course, you're going to make friends for life. I mean, that's a given. That usually happens anywhere you go in college. But I'd say the biggest differentiator is getting the full experience, especially if you're considering being a student athlete. You're coming in with a full, I like to call it a pre-packaged group of friends. And just through the Queens culture overall, I mean, you're coming in with close relationships to upperclassmen. It's really like getting shortcuts on experience, right? Because upperclassmen, when they were underclassmen, they got, the inside scoop of the university and everything from their upperclassmen. So that message kind of permeates downward. And then the true yes and experience, I think, boils down to, one, you're going to reach your full potential. And unlike other universities, I think you're going to reach your full potential at Queens more likely in every facet. So especially if you open yourself up to different clubs and orgs, you're going to reach your full potential as an athlete, as a student, and then you're also going to build out that resume when you prepare to make that jump to a career. So it's multifaceted why you should choose Queens. But if I'm an example of it, I'd have to say from my experience, it'd be to better yourself in every single area of life.
Well, like you said, and I think that's kind of key, is it's an all-encompassing experience. It's not just one thing or the next thing or whatever. And, I think it sometimes gets lost in translation of, being a student athlete. The first word in that is student. And of course, you have to work hard, because if you don't work hard in the classroom, you can't compete in the pool or on the field or whatever it might be. So, Nick, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us here. I appreciate it. But more importantly, thanks so much for really kind of making people understand what it is to be a Royal. And of course, best of luck in your career. And I know you're still rooting every year for the swim team. And hey, keep on rooting, because you guys started the tradition and they haven't ceased it just yet. So.
Oh yeah, real proud of them this year. Love to see that, especially because the freshmen my senior year were seniors this year. So incredibly proud to see them come full circle.
Absolutely. And Nick, I appreciate you joining us here today, and we'll make sure we catch up with you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. All right, that'll do it for us here for another Alumni Spotlight. Make sure you tune back in for the next right here on the Queen Sports Network.